Okay, so last time we were here, we were making the ship move and fly about. And today we'll be talking about adding a laser in to shoot and adding an enemy. And one of the key things we need to understand for that is something called cloning. So today's lesson is all going to be about cloning and then using stuff that we've learned before. So let's get started. So here we are, we have our ship and it moves around and does all sorts of things like that. And our next task is we want it to actually shoot something. So in order to do that, we actually have to give it an object to shoot. So we need to come down here to New Sprite. You can choose one from the existing or draw one. My laser is rather simple. I just use a box. I make it a solid color like red, and I make it really thin, like that. And I just center it. Always make sure to center, like that. And so there we go. I have a laser. And one of the things you'll notice is that it starts out showing. So I usually tell it to, when it starts to hide, because of course the laser should not be there when the game starts, right? And then we need to say, okay, well that's fine. I have all my movement, it moves this and that. I need to shoot, and how do I know when to shoot? Well, most people just use the space bar, and we know how to detect if the space bar is hit, just like we did here when we detected the up arrow or the down arrow. So we use our control, if sensing the key space is pressed, we're going to do something called create a clone. And clone just means create a copy, because we want to fire the laser more than once. If we didn't do this, we could only fire it once. We want to make multiple copies of it. So we're going to do this little thing down here called create a clone. And we're not choosing myself, we are actually choosing Sprite 1. Before I change that though, I'm going to go over here. It's always good practice to name your objects, and I'm going to name mine laser. Okay, there we go. And so when I go back to my ship, I want to create a clone of my laser. So again, all we've added is if the key is pressed, then create a clone of the laser. Over on the laser side, you'll notice there's this other thing. It looks exactly like the same shape as the flag, and that basically tells us something's going to start happening, a new thread. And it says, when I start as a clone, what do you want it to do? Well, the first thing I want it to do is I want it to go to where the ship is. So I need to go to the ship. That makes sense, right? And so if I run this, you'll notice nothing happens. Well, remember how we hid it over here? We need to show it. So I forgot, we need to put that in there, and we need to show. And when you do, you'll see there it is. It's creating copies of the laser all over the place, and in a nice kind of heart shape for Valentine's Day. There we go. Okay, so we have a clone, we have a laser, but they're not doing anything, and we really, really want them to move. So we're going to stop that there and say, okay, well, do we know how to move? We do. We've done this many, many times, which is we use a forever. And motion, we tell it to move 10 steps forward. And when we do that, we get something that looks like that. And it kind of goes there. And you'll notice over here on the right, there are all these lasers. They don't disappear. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And I'll go through the main reason, because we didn't tell them to. And we kind of need to tell them to. So we do have a working laser, but eventually it's going to create so many clones that it will stop. There will be no more lasers. There we go. It has stopped. And we need to fix that. And we need to fix that by destroying some of the other objects. So we need to tell it when do we destroy it. And you'll notice it was on the edge. So most of the time we try and detect the edge. And so we can use this forever. If touching the edge, then delete this clone. Okay? And that will go through, it will delete this clone, and you'll notice now they disappear when they touch the edge. Except you'll notice when I'm over here, I can't shoot, and the reason why is because my laser is now touching the edge, right? So I can't shoot because my ship is on the edge and touching it. We could add some validation if we wanted to make sure that, you know, if the X position or something was greater or something like that. But we don't want that. We just want to touch the edge for now. Delete that clone. Okay, good. We now have a shooting laser. Good for us. The next thing we want to do is we now need something to shoot, obviously. So we can draw our own, make our own ship. I've done that. I'm just going to use one for today. And the thing I'm going to use will probably be a, I don't know, let's take the Ghost for today. And actually, I know there's an airplane in here somewhere or something like that. Let's try and look for something good. So we have this spaceship. There we go. Let's use the spaceship. So this is going to be our enemy for today. The first thing you'll notice, he looks really, really big. So we're going to change his size a little bit. And the way we do that is we have a picture. There's two different modes. There's bitmap mode where you can draw on, and you'll notice the tools appear over here. And then there's vector mode, and that lets you really do some neat things like shrink and draw lines. And so we are going to shrink him down a bit. So that he's there, and we are also going to turn it by grabbing that little top box so that it's facing this way. So yeah, and I guess there's also flip if you want to flip and things like that. So there we go. And if we go on the information too, we can also change the way he's pointing. So we can change his direction all the way to -90, okay? So that way it looks like he's starting in this direction. And there we go. I want this guy to appear now and get shot by the laser and all sorts of things. And I want him to appear rather regularly. So again, we're going to use this idea of cloning. So I'm going to start when this is clicked. Of course, we need to hide him so that we don't see him. And because we only want the clones, and we need to create clones, and we can use the forever. We could use repeat if you only wanted there to be 100 enemies. You could use repeat 100 times. We're going to use forever, and we're going to create a clone. And this time you'll notice it says it is myself. It is. I'm going to create a clone of the spaceship. And so when I start as a clone this time, the first thing we need to do, of course, is make it show. We need to tell it where to go. And if you remember, we have these X and Y coordinates down here with -240 being here, 240 being here, and somewhere around here being the proper spot, which is about 210. So it needs to go to about 210. As you can see, it's that. And of course, we'll start out at 0 for now. And then we need to tell it to do something. We need it to move, so we will tell it forever. And if you remember when we went here, we pointed the direction to the left. So it should be moving in that direction. We could either use move 10 steps, and you'll see that it does. Or I'm going to use change X by -10 today, just because that's what I've done in class. Doesn't matter, as long as your ship's pointing the right way, it doesn't really matter. So there we go. You'll notice one of the problems that it has here is it just creates this huge stream of ships. So the reason why that is because it just keeps going through this really, really fast. So we need to slow that down a bit. And I like to throw in a wait 1 second, and then you'll notice it throws one every second or so. And that's a pretty decent speed that we can use. So we can use that to go through it. And that's really all there is to it. The one thing I always like to tell people is the Y position, where it starts. Obviously, it coming from here all the time is not so good. We want it to start anywhere in here. And you'll notice the Y is from -180 all the way up to 180. For the purposes of this, we're going to use -160 and then to 160. Okay, and there we go. It should start coming up randomly anywhere in between. Great, except you'll notice again they don't disappear, and we need to figure out a way to do that. And one of the things we can do is we can use once again the if statement. If touching the edge, then we can tell it to delete this clone. And we can put a whole bunch of stuff in there too if you want to keep track of life or something like that. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So now you'll notice they disappear when they hit the clone. Well, what if I want them to disappear when they hit the laser? Well, we already know how to make them disappear if they touch something, so it's really simple. If touching the laser, then delete this clone. And sure enough, there it goes. And it disappears. Well, what if we want to keep track of how many times we shoot them? Well, we can make a variable called, for instance, we'll call it kills for this one, and we'll make it for all sprites. And we can just change our kills by 1. You'll notice that it's at 0. And if it hits the laser, obviously we have killed it, not the wall has killed it. Change the kills by 1. We can set the kills up, and of course, now it keeps track of how many we've killed. So there you go. That's the basic game to it. And once you have that, you are pretty much done. I'm going to go into some advanced things in the next video, so maybe there's some things you want to look at. But for now, we have a basic game that keeps track of kills. Could you keep track of life and all that? Certainly you could. You could make more enemies, all that stuff. And we'll go into that in the next video. Okay.